Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Next Up, a series where I interview young CEOs, entrepreneurs, and those in the know covering all sorts of topics from fashion to tech and mental health. Today, we have Mazdak Sanii, co-founder of Avant Art, which is a limited edition art drop group who do super cool collabs all online. And we're going to be talking about art and the world of art and the future of art today. So Mazdak, thank you so much for joining me. You can definitely explain a lot better than I exactly what you do. So talk a little bit about Avant Art.
We're an online community primarily of young people who are interested in collecting and discovering art, and more than 2 million of our followers are under 35, and we partner with leading contemporary artists to make high quality editions of their work, so sculpture editions and print editions and works on paper, and help them connect with the next generation of collectors. My role is co-founder and CEO. My background was in music, first as a French horn player, and then helped build an online music platform called Boiler Room from the early days, and have been in the visual arts since 2018.
Amazing. And I think this was just before your time, but in 2017, there was an exhibition with Katrin Friedrichs. And after the exhibition, online, you did a series of art drops. And this kind of went wild and instantly sold out. Why do you think at 2017 art drops were met with such enthusiasm? And, why was that so cool at the time? Because you guys have obviously nailed it since then, and that's what you guys do.
There are a lot of broader trends around collecting culture. There's just a much wider demographic of people who would consider themselves collectors, art collectors or luxury fashion collectors or watch collectors. We owe a massive debt to street culture for encouraging young people to get into the psychology of collecting. Limited editions were an amazing way for us to work directly with artists that we were really inspired by, but in a way that was helping them explore a new medium or a new area of their practice, and also that was super collaborative with all of the different partners that they already worked with, be they galleries or museums. And I think on the other side, it was a great way for us to make collecting the work of amazing artists more accessible to younger collectors. That started with Katrin and started with, a screen print edition of her paintings, but we work in mahogany and bronze and marble and lots of different mediums, but all with the premise that we're trying to bring something unique about the artist practice to a new audience and a new group of collectors.
You're quite democratic in terms of your age range. I mean, you work with a 30-year-old artist and artists in their 70s. You've collaborated with huge heavy hitters like Jenny Holtzer and the Chapman brothers. I guess, when you have an artist who has really made it and they're kind of not new, and they have museums and galleries like clamoring for one of their artworks, what makes them very interested to work with you guys to do kind of limited editions when they could just have one huge artwork in a gallery? Like what's the kind of connect there?
A lot of artists, still care very passionately about sharing their practice and their work with the public. It's why museums are held in such high esteem, and through the fact that we've got this really big and very engaged community online, we can help artists share their practice with a new generation. The project you mentioned with Jenny Holtzer, we worked with Jenny on a really beautiful sculpture edition. It was this hand-blown glass pharmacy jar.
They looked amazing.
And it had had condons that were printed with her truisms, but also Walt Whitman poetry on them. And it was really the project was around raising awareness around the fight against AIDS, and also raising funds for the New York City AIDS Memorial. And so the campaign that we did, the sort of, taking her practice or the purpose behind our works, was also all around that. So we had these LED trucks going around New York with, with her animation of more text from Walt Whitman and more text from her. We put digital placements on Grindr, and also told the story through our Instagram channel of lots of artists that were lost to AIDS, and Paul Tech as an example. Trying to connect both the sort of the content of the campaign and the means of sort of, raising awareness, but also then with the physical object that got into 35 new collectors' homes.
Feel like that's quite a good way for artists who are a bit stuck in their ways and practices. You are kind of the floodgates to that slightly younger generation in that sense. That's not something she probably would have been able to have organized on her own. You guys kind of have this incredible tap into a young audience. I mean, even on your website, you have stuff for a couple of €100, but you also obviously go up into the thousands. What's the average age of your consumers? Do you see it as typical younger consumers start with the prints, they work their way up? Have you actually seen something a bit different? And I think especially last year during the pandemic, everyone was like really internal. They were thinking about their interior space. We saw that with huge interior design booms. Suddenly people are thinking, I want to make my space nice and investing in art. What's your kind of demographic? And did that shift during the pandemic? Are you seeing any new trends?
The engagement in the community has just meant that there's always been more people trying to get access to the works than we've had works to give them. During the pandemic, as you say, like those drivers were pretty extreme. People were, yes, looking at their IKEA posters and wanting something that felt more genuinely creative or like it connected with them in some way. Art was a major outlet for them to, escapism or a creative outlet that they really needed when, every other stimulus or most other stimuli were shut down. And so, I think art took a really central place in a lot of people's minds as well as on their Zoom backgrounds.
And what did you see people kind of leaning towards the most?
The thing we found with our collectors is that they have very eclectic tastes between, different mediums and different practices and different artists. And most of the time isn't this sort of linear journey from, younger artists to more established artists, from lower price print editions to unique drawings. It's a very sort of diverse journey that a lot of them go on. And often they're sort of connecting with different pieces for totally different reasons. It could be decoration and they really aesthetically connect to work. It could be that they, really want to support an artist at an early or like an important stage in their career and they're sort of modern patrons. It could be that they're like, like with Jenny's work, people can connect with that theoretically as well as in terms of her place in art history. There's loads of different reasons. And so I think that also directs the eclecticism that people collect through.
I'd be definitely remiss if I didn't talk about the rise of NFTs, which, of course, I feel like have exploded. Your face says it all. I feel like you're probably so bored of this topic, but it really exploded, especially over the past couple of months. It certainly looks like, although the values might be decreasing, NFTs are here to stay.
I guess there are two elements to an NFT. One is a digital piece, so digital artwork, and the other element is a smart contract that really, secures the scarcity and authenticity of that artwork. So it's basically a digital certificate of authenticity saying that this is the original piece in the world. Within that smart contract, not only can you say this is the authenticated piece and, it's authenticated on the blockchain and decentralized and unhackable, but you can also define how that piece then behaves commercially on the secondary market. So once a piece has been sold for the first time, the smart contract can then define how that piece, it can say the artist needs to get a 10, 20% share of any future transactions that happen with this piece. Or it can say, the piece itself will respond to like some external phenomena. If Joe Biden gets elected, it turns into this color, or, in 3 years' time, it changes totally in medium or form. I think those two things are like, for me, the most exciting about NFTs. And they do get slightly lost in the auction results and the hype and the sort of transaction values. And I think in some parts of the art world, there's a bit of a revulsion is probably too strong, but there's a bit of ambivalence about that hype. And I think for us, that hype is only a positive thing. It's art being on the front page of every major publication is an incredible thing. And people, whether they're crypto bros or they're, the most curatorially sound, experienced collector, new people getting into owning cultural assets and getting excited by artistic practice, again, is great. Some of the values are coming down and you've had a price correction. I think that will probably likely to continue a little bit, but in the long term, those things around authentication, traceability, what it could do for artists' economics, I think those are the really exciting things for us.
Is that the way that the art market is going to do? Are we going to see a kind of dialogue between NFTs and real life art forever and always? Or do you think it is a bubble and it will go and we're just always going to come back to a kind of sense of realism when it comes to art?
It's one manifestation of a layering of the idea that suddenly NFTs or digital art is going to totally change all the most important contemporary artists into, digital artists and hiring animators and all the rest of it. I don't think it's that, it's that seismic. I think what could be that seismic is, if you can start to solve that like age-old art world problem, which is an artist sells a work for $500, a collector buys 10 of them, and then 2 years later is selling all of them for more than $1 million, and the artist sees no benefit from that. I think that solving that problem could really revolutionize the power dynamics, artist economics, everything, or almost everything. We'll have new problems when that's solved.
Well, the resale market, I think, is pretty interesting, especially with younger consumers, because kind of younger millennials, and especially Gen Z, they are like micro retailers. They live for resale. How do you tackle that problem when you guys are selling art? I know that in the past you've kind of seen works like a week later pop up for, more money than you sold it for. How can you actually tackle that problem? And as you said, benefit the artist, keep the industry going. It's it's obviously a difficult one to solve, but like, how are you guys trying to tackle it now?
In lots of other marketplaces, that like vibrant secondary market also supports the primary market. And so it can be a really positive thing for the overall ecosystem. I think the challenge here is that there is a limit to the amount, it's not like a fashion brand where artists can just produce a new run and benefit from that primary market in the same way. Their production is very limited, and consciously or just sort of practically. And so the main issue is that there just isn't any support for the artists from what happens in the secondary market. And I think that's then led to artists being, really all you get is downside if you're an artist. The secondary market comes with a lot of risk because, the values can go massively up, and then you can have a price correction that can really hurt your primary market. And so I think artists bear all of the risk and none of the upside. And so there's been this sort of, understandable caution around the secondary market. With Jenny, for example, in the project we were talking about, that was something she was really concerned about, was sort of, things coming up at auction weeks or months later. And so I think there are tactical things you can do, like, we have FaceTime calls with collectors to understand, to get more of a feeling before they buy a work for, the fact that they really want it in their collection. We send physical certificates, old world physical certificates, 6 months after the work's sent, so that it doesn't immediately come up on the secondary market. On the collector side, we want to bring artistic practice to collectors who want it in their homes, and so I think it's also important to us that it's not just a sort of a resale game or people sort of hoovering up supply that then comes out of the hands of collectors who want to enjoy it in their homes.
During the pandemic kind of months particularly, you guys have proven the fact that you don't need actually a gallery to sell works. Do you kind of think that we're always going to need a physical space to sell art? Will artists really need that going forward? I mean, people are still a bit unsure about whether they're going to go out and visit things, or do you think that physical spaces for art is always going to be necessary?
It will be for me. I think, it goes back to sort of what we were saying about NFTs earlier. Like, I think the idea that you wouldn't have, creative expression and all of these things happening in a digital reality, I think is short-sighted. But I think also the idea that it would flip totally out of your physical reality and you wouldn't care about art in your physical reality and just have it digitally, I think again is, really, really myopic. And I think, for me, the best way to experience art and discover art is 100% in person. I think Instagram's amazing for opening access and helping people, opening the aperture for people to discover new artists and new works. It's not scrolling with your thumb is not the best way to really connect with an artist or a piece. Museums have been making art more accessible, which is our whole MO for over 100 years and do that in incredible ways and retain a depth of creative engagement that's really remarkable. Galleries really nurture artists' markets, but also their practices, and they partner for decades with artists, and so they're incredibly important. I don't think Instagram
it's going to ruin the art market forever. No. And okay, so
it's become a really important part of the ecosystem, and it's become a way for artists to connect with people who love their practice, and I think all of that's really important. But it doesn't mean that in the same way that NFTs don't suddenly flip the entire art market towards GIFs and I don't think Instagram does a similar thing.
What kind of practical advice would you give a young budding artist who, they want to get into the space? What would you say?
The best artists are very thoughtful the whole way along in sort of everything they do. And so, I don't necessarily think it's about a specific channel or a specific, partner or a specific medium. I think it's just if you can apply the same thoughtful and creative and joyful approach that you apply to your practice across everything you do that's sort of connected to your work, I think that's probably the most impactful thing that we've seen.
Thank you so much, Mazdak, for joining us today. I definitely learned a lot. I hope you really enjoyed yourself.
It's been great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone at home. Make sure you stay tuned for a new episode next week.
Today, I set up a savings goal with NatWest, so in a few months,
I'll be on my way to finally sorting this room out.
camel or sand?
Sand.
NatWest. Tomorrow begins today.